Hello, very good morning and welcome to Sky News Breakfast. We start this morning in Sudan, where British nationals trying to escape fighting have been told they must reach an airport near Khartoum by 11 o'clock UK time this morning if they want to catch the final RAF evacuation flight out of the country this evening. Inside Sudan, Sky News has seen the desperation of people trying to flee from the country's main port city. People have attempted to escape the conflict in Sudan by land, sea and air. Much of the evacuation focus has been at Wadi Saidna airfield north of Khartoum. The British evacuation mission has rescued 1,573 people, largely from this airfield. Many more have fled over land, with up to 20,000 people having entered Chad alone. And Port Sudan has become a focus for foreign nationals hoping to escape the violence by sea, with passenger ships making crossings to Jeddah in Saudi Arabia. Our Africa correspondent Yusra El-Bagir has travelled the opposite way, along with some Sudanese people desperate to get home despite the violence. And this is what she saw as she travelled to Port Sudan.
Ships have been carrying people to safety from Sudan, but this one is taking them to its shores. Swathes of Sudanese people took the first travel option back to their country to be with their loved ones. Death will find you anywhere, he says. It's important we're with our families.
I have been one of the losers of this war.
Ashraf is a Saudi Arabia resident but lost his mother and sister in the early days of the war. They died in a car accident as they fled the violence.
I need to go there to support my sister, my brother, because of this. They are really in bad situation.
Mona was making a pilgrimage to Mecca when hell broke loose back home.
Suffering a lot till I found a ticket. So, no, alhamdulillah. Yeah, because I left my child 1 year and a half, you know.
People flood the deck, anxiously waiting to disembark. We were offered amnesty but insist on reaching Sudan no matter what, he says. But they're yet to see what Sudan has become. Port Sudan has transformed into an epicenter of displacement. Hundreds are here praying they'll win the lottery and their names will be called. The wait already feels too long.
This is madness. The numbers are overwhelming. People here from all over the world wanting to get out of Sudan as soon as possible, but struggling to find a sustainable way to do so. There have been many promises that haven't been fulfilled. There have been many ships that have come and gone.
We are suffering, she says. Even in Syria, we didn't see war like this.
You're Sudanese, your husband's from Yemen. Where are you going to go?
Actually, I'm going for Yemen.
You're going to go to Yemen?
Yeah.
You prefer Yemen to Sudan right now?
Yeah.
Why?
You see, now there is no safety.
Masses of people who would choose anything else than the horror from which they've come. Yusra El-Bagir, Sky News, Sudan.
Hospitals are warning of exceptionally low staff numbers over the bank holiday weekend as thousands of nurses prepare to go on strike from tomorrow evening. The Royal College of Nursing has now agreed to supply some staff during the walkout, although hospitals warned of serious concerns over safety. The union says it's now agreed what it called safety-critical mitigations with NHS England. But there could be a glimmer of hope that wider strikes across the NHS in England are coming to an end after the biggest health union voted to accept the government's latest pay offer. The GMB union has announced that its members voted to accept the pay deal aimed at averting more strikes. But the same offer has been rejected by members of Unite. Well, let's cross to Westminster and say hello again to our political correspondent, Rob Powell. Morning again to you, Rob. So, in the short term, some real concerns about the effect that these nurses' strikes could have on patients and hospitals.
Yeah, and that nurses' walkout in England due to begin at 8 p.m. tomorrow. And the big difference with this strike is that there were no what's called derogations put in by the union. Those are essentially broad areas of care where unions agree to keep nurses working. Previously, there have been derogations for things like cancer care, intensive care, A&E. Those are not included in this walkout, and that is potentially what has caused some hospitals a large degree of worry, including Great Ormond Street, the world-renowned children's hospital in central London, that said that it had serious concerns about being able to provide safe staffing levels. There was always a degree of flexibility built into those plans on the union side in terms of providing life and limb cover, and it appears some of that flexibility has been actioned in the last 12 to 24 hours, with the RCN listing on their website last night quite a few parts of certain hospitals where nurses will be working, including things like cardiac care in the Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital, A&E, specialist surgery, also other emergency departments in other hospitals in England where nurses will be turning up to work from 8 p.m. On Sunday evening. So concern in the short term from the NHS as the Royal College of Nursing continues their dispute. I think more broadly, though, what we saw yesterday was the GMB union, which represents paramedics and other NHS workers, accept this pay deal. And that means overall, when you look at all of the unions that were locked in this dispute, or this part of the NHS pay dispute, it looks like a majority of them are in favour, which means that it's likely that next week we'll see the Health Secretary decide to implement this pay deal, even on the unions like the RCN that have previously rejected it. We will have to see where those unions go from there, whether they vote for more strike action. But I think overall, it looks like this part of the NHS dispute anyway is edging towards a conclusion.
OK, Rob, interesting one to watch. Thanks very much indeed. Well, meanwhile, teachers and head teachers across 4 unions say they could coordinate their strike action this autumn. Only one teachers' union, the National Education Union, has a mandate to stage walkouts as things stand, but 3 others are holding votes for their members. The government offered teachers a £1,000 payment for this year, on top of an average 5.4% rise last September and 4.5% boost next year. But that's below the current rate of inflation of 10.1%, with unions rejecting the offer as insulting. Well, let's get the view now from Labour. And the Shadow Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, joins me now. A very good morning to you. Thanks so much for talking to us, Bridget Phillipson. So let's first of all kick off with that talk from 4 teachers' unions saying they intend to take coordinated strike action this autumn when they ballot their members. Do you back that move?
I don't want to see any disruption to children's learning. Our children experienced extraordinary disruption during the pandemic, but the responsibility and this failure lies squarely with the government. We've known for months and months and months that we were likely to get to this point unless the government was serious about negotiating. And what we've seen in that time, of course, is 5 secretaries of state and a total unwillingness on the part of the government to engage seriously in the negotiations that we need to make sure that this is settled. We're facing an unprecedented level of action and disruption, and that is the government's failure. And I think it does represent that wider anger that so many of our teachers and school leaders feel at the moment, undervalued and underappreciated by this Conservative government.
How worried are you for the effect on pupils of coordinated action? It'll mean far more full school closures, won't it?
I don't want strikes to go ahead. No parent wants to see their children's learning disrupted. And actually, teachers and school leaders don't want to be doing this either. They feel that they've been pushed to this point by a government that is just unwilling to negotiate properly and isn't taking their concerns seriously. Now, the Secretary of State is either unwilling or unable to sit down properly and hammer out a deal, or perhaps she just isn't trusted by the Prime Minister to make that happen. It is our children who will pay the price for the government's total failure to get serious, get around the table and resolve this dispute.
You're announcing a plan to recruit more teachers. Why do you think a Labour government would improve recruitment levels when the government hasn't?
What I'm setting out today is that Labour is the party of high and rising standards. We want to make sure that every child in every part of our country gets the best possible start in life, and that excellence is for everyone, not just some of our children. What we're seeing right now, particularly where it comes to specialist teachers in our schools, is a real crisis. 1 in 4 physics lessons being taught by non-specialists, 1 in 10 maths lessons not being taught by specialists. Now, the Prime Minister tells us he wants more maths teachers in our schools. Absolutely. But we don't have enough teachers already to deliver the curriculum, and that has to change. Labour will make sure that we put education right at the heart of the vision for Britain, and I'll be setting out more today about how we'll make teaching a really attractive place for our best graduates, because we do need to make sure that we get more teachers into our classrooms. That's how we will transform the life chances of children across our country.
OK, well, a lot of teachers or prospective teachers might say the way to make it more attractive is to pay us more. Is that what you're saying, that Labour government would pay teachers more?
Of course, pay is important, and the last Labour government delivered real terms pay increases for our teachers. We also took action to drive up standards, to cut child poverty, and to make sure that there was proper support for families right around our schools. But when you speak to teachers, those coming through, as I was doing yesterday at the University of Sunderland, of course pay comes up, but actually workload pressures, the fact they don't feel appreciated or valued. They want to believe that the government is on their side, has their back, and wants to work as partners in making sure that we do see high and rising standards for all of our children. And that's the approach that I would be taking as Secretary of State.
Nurses go on strike for 28 hours from tomorrow evening. Hospitals are warning of exceptionally low staff numbers over this weekend. How concerned are you?
Of course, we're all concerned, and I do note that the RCN is seeking to put in place mitigations, as you were discussing earlier, and that's right that they do it. But once again, patients have seen months and months of avoidable disruption because the government just haven't been serious about getting around the table and resolving this.
Let me just turn to the issue of Sudan, if I can, before we let you go. The government has said that the last evacuation flight out of Sudan will be this evening. British nationals have now just a couple of hours to get to the airport in Khartoum to make that flight. They say the number of British nationals coming forward are now dwindling. Do you back the government calling off its flights after tonight?
I pay tribute to our armed forces and everyone involved in these evacuation efforts. It has been an incredibly difficult operation, incredibly serious, and they faced real challenges in making sure that we can evacuate British nationals and British residents. And of course, the government are right to urge that people come forward as quickly as possible, because the difficulties around the ongoing conflict means that it will be more difficult for the government to ensure that anyone past this point is able to leave the country.
There are reports that NHS doctors who have work permits to work here, but they're not British nationals, they don't have British passports. There are reports that they will now be allowed on the evacuation flights. Would you welcome that if it was confirmed?
We've been calling for that, for British residents to be able to take part in the evacuation efforts, and for the British government to support British residents alongside British nationals in leaving Sudan. So we welcome that. We hope it's happening. I think there still have been some difficulties, but I sincerely hope that all efforts are made and that we see success in allowing British residents to get on those departures from Sudan as quickly as possible.
OK, Bridget Phillipson, Shadow Education Minister, thank you very much indeed for your time. Thank you. Now, it's just a week to go until the coronation, and Buckingham Palace has released new official portraits of the King and Queen Consort to mark the occasion. We've also been given a bit of a glimpse of what's known as the anointing screen, which will hide the King from view at a key point in the service. Dan Whitehead reports.
Prince Charles was now in the Abbey to witness the anointing.
It is the most sacred part of a royal coronation. The anointing, historically regarded as a moment between sovereign and God, is hidden from cameras and the millions watching worldwide. 70 years on from his mother's coronation, the anointing screen for King Charles has been completed. It will shield the King as the Archbishop of Canterbury anoints the sovereign. Created by 150 students and staff at the Royal School of Needlework, the tree design was personally selected by the monarch, each leaf depicting one of the 56 countries of the Commonwealth.
It's been incredible. It's been a really, really big team project, and I think that's what's been so lovely about it, because everybody has been able to bring their skills to this screen, and it's just been amazing to work with everybody and collaborate.
Accept our offering of this anointing screen, which we dedicate this day.
Blessed at a special service at the Chapel Royal at St James's Palace, the screen will be carried by service personnel from regiments of the Household Division before the crowning of His Majesty.
The screen is there to actually provide privacy to the most sacred part of the ceremony. And previously, it was a canopy over the top, which actually didn't provide real privacy. It was more figurative. And now this three-sided screen provides, absolute privacy during the process.
Ahead of next weekend, 3 new photographs of the King and the Queen Consort have been released, taken in the blue drawing room at Buckingham Palace. It is now down to the fine details and finishing touches, with just days to go till the ceremony he has waited more than 70 years for. Dan Whitehead, Sky News.
And just a reminder that we have a special and exclusive augmented reality web experience of The Crown to show you, and it's been launched on the Sky News app on your mobile phones. It essentially puts a life-size crown for you to look at in detail, and you can have a go yourself by scanning the QR code with your mobile phone. Well, our royal commentator Alistair Bruce has been giving it a try.
For the first time, you can experience the crown in your own home. Just press this button and it will materialise in front of you. And then you can walk around it, you can engage with it, and you will know as much as anyone else does about the crown that will be used at the coronation on the 6th of May.
So do try it out yourselves. Now then, some of the other headlines around this morning. A body found by police investigating the murder of pregnant teacher Mirelle Sturrock has been formally identified as that of her partner, David Yates. Police Scotland launched a hunt for Mr Yates after Miss Sturrock was found dead in Glasgow on Tuesday. Yates was wanted in connection with his partner's murder, and police say his death is not being treated as suspicious. Official documents about a £1.3 billion Royal Navy hunter-killer submarine were reportedly found in the toilets of a Wetherspoons pub. The documents showed the inner workings of the HMS Anson and used by submariners during their learning period. A Royal Navy spokesman said the documents were used for training and contained no classified information, but an investigation has been launched. The controversial misogynist Andrew Tate has gained more than 6 million Twitter followers in the 5 months since his account was reinstated. He was banned from the site in 2017 over inflammatory posts, including one saying rape victims bear responsibility for what happened to them. Research by Sky News suggests the followers he's amassed could be generating a 7-figure sum in advertising revenue for Twitter. The government has awarded nearly £40 million for more than 80 projects to protect the world's most endangered animals and plants. Snow leopards, elephants and pangolins are amongst the animals that will benefit from a funding boost from the Darwin Initiative and Legal Wildlife Trade Challenge Fund. Now then, let's take a look at the bank holiday weather, shall we?
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, the bank holiday weekend will bring some heavy and thundery showers, but there'll be some pleasant sunny spells as well. There's plenty of cloud out there now, with a few fog and patches and some showers. Northern Britain will stay rather grey and chilly through the morning with some outbreaks of rain, but the far north of Scotland looks fine. Elsewhere, cloud will break up to give some warm, sunny spells, but there'll be a scattering of heavy showers away from southeast England.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Jackie's here with the sport. Surely spring is on the way.
Well, you keep saying that every week.
I know. I'm willing it to
rubbish
happen.
weather and it just keeps raining.
Shows you I have absolutely no control. No surprise there.
I think we should cut the weather out for a couple of weeks until it improves.
To getting us down too much.
Look, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all.
Only good weather reports.
Ever tell you that?
In the meantime, it's all hotting up as far as buying Manchester United is concerned.
Yes, final bids were put in last night by the 10 o'clock deadline. It seems like the Qatari bid of Sheikh Jassim, who've offered $5 billion, even though the Glazers value the club at $6 billion. They've offered $5 billion, and we will redevelop the stadium and we will redevelop the squad. So really it's $6 billion, but you're not getting all of it, is pretty much what they've said to the Glazers. So Jim Ratcliffe has also put in an updated bid, his Ineos bid, but he doesn't want to buy all of their shares. So that would leave the Glazers with some kind of control at Manchester United. And the fans would really hate that. And in fact, the fans are already protesting against that one. So it'll be interesting to see what they go for. If the Glazers think, well, actually, we want to keep a little finger in the pie here at United, maybe they'll go for the Jim Ratcliffe bid. Or if they want rid of all their shares, then it's the Qataris. But last night was the final deadline, and those bids are in.
Yeah.
And we will find out.
We'll wait and see. Yeah.
We will find out. Perhaps it will be good news for United fans. Unlike the weather, Anna. Things are going really well on the pitch, though, for United's women.
Hello, good morning. You're watching Sky News Breakfast. A reminder of our top stories here this morning. UK rescue efforts in Sudan are winding down. British nationals have just hours to make it to an airport near Khartoum before the last RAF evacuation flight. A week until the coronation, new official portraits of the King and Queen consort are released. And the Nurses' Union agrees to make some staff available during strikes this bank holiday weekend after hospitals warn of serious concerns about patient safety. So let's get more on that now. Joining me now is the Chief Executive Officer of the NHS Confederation, Matthew Taylor. Very good morning to you, Matthew Taylor. Thanks so much for talking to us. So suggestions this morning that the Nurses' Union, the RCN, is holding talks to provide some staff cover after warnings about patient safety during their strike, which is due to start tomorrow evening. What can you tell us about that?
Well, obviously, we're relieved that the RCN is having those conversations and has agreed that if there are emergency situations, then nurses will be called in. But this strike action, now only really a day as a consequence of legal action last week, will still have an impact. And like all the industrial action that's taken place over the last 6 months, it involves leaders and managers in the health service and to spend a great deal of time thinking about the contingencies they've got to put in place, cancelling procedures, moving staff around in order as best as possible to cope with this strike action.
How extensive do you think the cover being offered by the nursing unions might be?
Well, we won't know, I don't think, and that's part of the challenge for the people I represent, members I represent. You know, we will have to wait and see what happens. Obviously, we hope there are no major incidents are taking place over the bank holiday. And we hope that the demand that we have in our hospitals, of course, not all hospitals are affected by this strike, won't be overwhelming, but it is still very challenging. And I think that the attention now focuses on the Staff Council that's meeting next week, and our hope that there will be a majority now in favour of accepting the offer and that we can end this very damaging period of industrial action.
Well, yes, and let's talk about that, because health unions have been split, haven't they, on whether to accept the government's pay offer. 2 unions have voted for it, 2 against, but it looks like the majority of health unions, as you say, will end up voting in favour of it. So what happens then, in your view?
Well, if the majority on the Staff Council accepts the deal, then the deal will be accepted and it will be applied. There is a danger, there is a concern that unions who haven't accepted the deal might split off. We would very much encourage them not to do so. We think it's extremely important for NHS staff to stick together. They're paid under the same scale, called Agenda for Change. And that solidarity, that working together has been important. It's been part of the reason why the unions have been able to win concessions up to this point. So we hope that if the Staff Council accepts this, then all the unions will accept it. But I think it's really important to say that that doesn't mean that we as leaders of the health service don't recognise the real concerns amongst staff, that their pay has fallen. I talk to NHS leaders all the time, and many of them say to me they've never known a time when they're more concerned about staff morale. We see it's very hard to retain staff in the health service. We recruit staff reasonably well, but too many of them leave because they find the pressures of the job very difficult. So the issues that lie behind the strike, issues of recruitment, of retention, of motivation, they will continue to be there, and we need to address those questions.
Well, yes, and so even if the majority do vote to accept the government's pay offer, it is still possible that the RCN and Unite, who rejected it, will pursue their strike action.
And we would very much hope that isn't the case. You know, this 6 months of industrial action we've got, and of course we still have the junior doctors issue outstanding, has had a huge impact. it is possible for the health service with a fair wind to meet the very high levels of demand that we face and also make inroads into those backlogs that built up before COVID and during COVID. So we are able to make progress, and we've been able to show that, for example, we've more or less got rid of people who've been waiting, got rid of the phenomenon of people waiting more than 18 months to have their procedure. So we can make progress, but the industrial action has made that incredibly difficult. And so I would urge unions to accept the deal, to work together and continue to make the case, which we make as well as an organisation that represents leaders, for a proper workforce strategy. We have 120,000 vacancies in the NHS. So even when this dispute is over, even if this offer is accepted, there are still some very big issues that we need to address.
And of course, in the meantime, the nurses' strike due to start tomorrow will, of course, go ahead. So how concerned are you about patient safety?
Well, obviously, the fact that it's down effectively to 1 day, and the fact that the RCN have agreed that in emergency circumstances they will call nurses in, this means that it's going to have less impact than we feared it would have at the beginning. But it is still very disruptive, and it still means that the people I represent, leaders and managers, have to spend a huge amount of time preparing for various contingencies which can occur when strike action happens. And over the last 6 months, of course, we've seen hundreds of thousands of operations and appointments cancelled, and that all has an impact on a health service already under a great deal of strain.
OK, well, Matthew Taylor from the NHS Confederation, we appreciate your time this morning. Thanks so much for talking to us.
Thank you.
Now, a grieving mother waiting 2 years for justice for her son, and a man remanded in jail for 18 months only to be found not guilty. Just two people united by a justice system that some people say is failing. After delays to trials caused by the pandemic and barrister strikes, the number of prisoners on remand has reached its highest level in 50 years. Sky's Rachel Venables has this report.
No, he's such a loving boy, really loving, energetic. Life and soul of the party.
A grieving mother at her son's grave. Stacey O'Donnell's son Ty was stabbed to death by his abusive girlfriend. But court delays, a COVID backlog and a cancelled first trial last September due to the barristers' strike meant they ended up waiting nearly 2 years for a trial.
I'd spent months worrying about what might happen, overthinking different scenarios about how the trial might play out. And then it came to September and, I hadn't been sleeping all year. I've been waking up, I kid you not, 4 or 5 o'clock every day, waking up, anxiety, really going through it. It's not until the trial was passed that I can actually feel how much weight has been lifted.
But it's not just victims and their families who are harmed by these delays. Also waiting months, if not years, for their day in court are the defendants, some of whom can spend that entire time behind bars, with latest figures showing that the number of people being held on remand is at its highest point for 50 years. A defendant being held in prison before their trial shouldn't spend more than 6 months on remand. But Emma Lewis represented one client who was jailed for 18 months, only to be found innocent.
The same day that the jury went out to consider their verdict, they returned a not guilty verdict because it was clear he was not guilty. And then he was just released with no support, nothing. We had to have him assessed because we were concerned. He became very introvert. He would struggle to speak.
Given the backlog, the Justice Committee has called on the government to review the law around remand prisoners, but they rejected several key recommendations.
These are people who have not been convicted of anything, and a percentage of them, reasonable percentage of them, will ultimately not be convicted statistically.
A Ministry of Justice spokesperson said remanded defendants are now waiting 15 weeks for trial on average, and we are investing almost £500 million to reduce the outstanding caseload in the courts. For Stacey, the guilty verdict is late but welcome, and it means she can finally prioritise the biggest fight of all, coming to terms with the loss of her beloved son. Rachel Venables, Sky News.
Let's take a look at the weather now.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather. Sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, the bank holiday weekend will bring some heavy and thundery showers, but there will be some pleasant sunny spells too. There's plenty of cloud out there now, with some fog and a few showers. Northern Britain will stay rather grey and chilly through the morning with some outbreaks of rain, but the far north of Scotland looks fine. Elsewhere, cloud will break up to give some warm sunny spells, but there'll be a scattering of heavy showers away from southeast England. Low cloud and sea fog will affect some coasts.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Coming up next, we'll take a detailed look at the front pages with journalist and broadcaster Bidisha Mamata and the Chief Executive of International Marketing Partners, Alison Stewart-Allen. That's coming up next. Time now for us to delve into the newspapers once again. Here with me reviewing them this morning are the journalist and broadcaster Bidisha Mamata and the Chief Executive of International Marketing Partners, Alison Stewart-Allen, who's here with me in the studio. So welcome back to both of you. Alison, we're actually kicking off with you this hour, and we're going into we've dealt with lots of the front pages, haven't we? So we're going inside. And this is an article that you've picked out from the Financial Times, focusing on this luxury group, LVMH.
Yes, indeed. So they purchased Tiffany, the very famous American diamonds and jewelry brand, a few years ago, spent millions on recently refurbishing their New York City Fifth Avenue store. And one of the interesting things about Tiffany is that, unlike its other luxury rivals, whether they are within the portfolio of 75 luxury brands of its owner LVMH, Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy, or its competition, this is sort of seen by the company as having huge potential to ramp up, raise their prices, improve their ranges, and make design more at the heart of the business. They're spending a significant amount on marketing and branding, 10% of the total budget. Typically, luxury brands don't spend that level. It's 5 to 7%. So why this is a story is because this luxury company, LVMH, really wants to turn up the dial and the heat on making Tiffany work. The interesting thing about this from my perspective is America doesn't really have many of its own luxury brands that are homegrown. Luxury does brilliantly in the US, but they're from everywhere else. They're from here, they're from France, Italy, etc. So this is a homegrown American luxury brand that has huge potential, and they are betting on this investment, really making Tiffany an even more global brand than it is right now.
That's so interesting, isn't it, as well, how there are always going to be some people who are very rich, even in a cost of living crisis. There are going to be people who want to spend money on very expensive stuff.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
Total contrast to your story, Bidisha. You're turning our attention to a double page spread in the Eye and the situation in Sudan. And I think it's a continuation from their front page about the Wagner Group, they say, who are operating in Sudan.
Yeah, this is completely extraordinary, because if you didn't know that it was a news headline, you'd think that this is the treatment for some sort of Hollywood disaster movie. The mercenary army group, the Wagner Group, who came to prominence in public understanding when Russia first invaded Ukraine and used mercenaries from this group, culling them out of prisons. So you've got convicted rapists and murderers who are fighting in this mercenary army, have now been involved in the fighting in Sudan. And this has broken out only in the last few days. It's been on all of the news headlines because it concerns a breakdown in civil life and government as rival military factions, even involving the Sudanese army, plus numerous other groups, are fighting it out. There's been a mass evacuation of all the people who could get out of their multiple nationalities. There's been a bit of controversy about the UK's relatively slow response to this. And even so, the deadline to get out, if you're a British passport holder, is today. It's a few hours from now. And Port of Sudan is where people are fleeing to, because from there you can get a boat to Saudi Arabia to then move on or seek asylum or to get away from the fighting. But this article is completely fascinating in a very dark and frightening way, because it shows that this mysterious Wagner Group have been involved in fighting with automatic weaponry, heavy-duty military weaponry in conflicts across the globe. And we didn't know this, of course, because they only got famous, and I hate to use that phrase because I feel like I'm giving them exactly what they want, when Russia invaded Ukraine.
Well, yes, exactly. So an awful lot of concern about what's going on in Sudan already, but this adds an extra layer, doesn't it? Some of these more details that are coming out. In the meantime, though, Alison, take us to the Daily Express and the big build-up to the coronation, of course. Yeah. We get this sort of daily drip feed of more information, don't we? So what's the Express focusing on?
Well, they're focusing on these new pictures of the king and Queen Consort looking relaxed and approachable. And, you know, releasing pictures like this is part of the branding process of the monarchy and of the UK, because, of course, all eyes around the globe will be on London and this country on the 6th of May.
A lot of interest. I mean,
incredible.
You say lots of your American friends are fascinated by
Absolutely. But and my friends on the continent and all over the world. You know, this is a global brand, the British monarchy. So these pictures are extremely deliberate to communicate what does this brand feel like, look like, as an attempt to engage the world. And it's a fantastic draw for tourism, for spending, as we've been talking about, and it's very deliberate. This is no accident.
And how do you think they should go about maximising that draw? I mean, you say they look very approachable. Do you think that's part of it? Or do you think it's better to be a little bit, you know, removed and different? Is that sort of sense of being special somehow? What do you think works?
Well, the times have changed. I mean, in the late Queen Elizabeth's era, that formality and distance was absolutely expected, not just with the subjects in the UK, but globally. And now we're in a completely different world. We expect celebrities of all types, whether they are influencers on social media or whether they're royal family members. We need to be able to relate now to those that we want to put our trust in. Hence, this more informal-looking approach absolutely is the way to engage these days. If you want to build a brand, it isn't that formality.
Yeah, fascinating. And post-coronation, fascinating to see how they decide to build on that or not. And Badisha, just take us to a story about baby formula milk for us. I don't know what paper it's in. It's the Eye. It's the Eye. Yes, and it's the headline is "Make Baby Formula Free for Parents." We've only got about 30 seconds, though, unfortunately. Very briefly.
I was checking my homework notes for you. Yes, this is an extraordinary interview with Professor Michael Marmot from UCL, who's pointing out that if you start off in life, you're a new parent, and you can't even afford baby formula, which can go up to £18 a box, and you need, for one child, you need 1 box per week. You are setting up for a lifetime of lowered health expectancy, lower competency, lower equality and opportunities in life. And he's saying that for the very, very hardest hit parents, there should be a prescription so that they can get baby formula to feed their babies for free.
Interesting stuff, and that's in the Eye if people want to read more about that. But we're out of time again for this hour, but we'll be back again next hour. Thank you.
Thank you.